All right. Hey, good morning and welcome to the panel. It's a very long name. Meeting the demand for sustainable mining and critical minerals with Mining 4.0. Sorry for the long name. We were trying to keep everyone happy. But ultimately, we are going to talk about as the society transitions to using less of the fossil fuels and move to some more sustainable sources of energy, which are the minerals, which are the metals that are going to play an enabling role? And let's call them critical minerals. And as we all know, not just the critical minerals, but also non-critical minerals, they have a short supply. The resources are limited. How fast can we excavate? How fast can we retrieve those minerals to meet the demand, the new demand, to the new transition? Now, the questions could be anywhere around, should we go that fast? Or do we have enough supply of those minerals? Should we find a balance between green and not so green? But those are all other questions for some different panel topic. But today we are going to talk about if we do end up deciding that we need to move fast enough to extract those critical minerals, what are the enabling technologies? How can we do that? How can we provide that sustainable supply? And I'm fortunate, and I believe that most of us are, that so many talented people, great leaders from different organizations, including Rio Tinto, Newmont, Vale, Teck, and one of the leading battery tech mineral company, they are joining us on this panel to talk about these important topics. So please join me in welcoming Paramita from Rio Tinto, Matthew Curtis from Newmont, Michelle, Preston, and Anthony Downs. All right, guys, thank you very much. Can you still hear me okay? You want me to shout?
Yes. Talk loud.
Okay. Thank you for joining. Let me move my chair so I can see Paramita.
I can't.
Okay, so my first question is to you, Michelle. To level set with the audience, how do we define critical minerals? What is the definition and where this name critical minerals come from?
Sure. So I'm not sure if my mic's on or not, but critical metals are really they're defined differently in different jurisdictions. But I think what the overall emphasis really is about are these are the metals that are essential for both economic and political growth within the nations that they are deemed critical. Again, there's different classes of critical metals, but I think the most important part is that they're used towards new energy systems and ways that we can greenify the world today.
I don't know if his microphone is working.
Yeah,
It was a really good explanation, by the way.
we heard it. Is my mic on now? Still not?
I can give you this microphone. See if this works.
Okay. Check. Can you hear me now? There. Check. I'll just use yours.
We'll share
We'll
technology at work.
Lean in close. COVID's gone, right? That should work. Okay, now this is working?
Okay.
All right, so sorry about that. Critical metals are, there's definitions for critical metals depending on which jurisdiction you're in, which country you're in, but I think the overall emphasis is really the same. These are metals that are deemed necessary for economic, for national security, and their purpose in the greenification or lowering the emissions that are here today. So again, in North America, there's around 30 to 35 of them. All of them play a very important role in the transition to a net zero economy.
Thank you, Michelle. You know, yesterday we had a little get-together, all of us, most of us, and we were talking about what's a success, the definition of success of this panel. And as we were talking about things, I said first thing that came to my mind, that was, let's have fun. That's a success criteria. But as I thought deeper last night, I started thinking from head, heart, and maybe hello, from the values perspective. My heart said, let's have fun and forget about everything else. But my head said, let's make it meaningful for all of you. This time, probably we are going to spend almost 100 people hour from the mining industry, and pretty important, very expensive time. So why don't we make it worth your time so you can take something away from this conversation? The people that we have here on this stage, they all have done tremendous work in discovering new methods, new way of working. And these people have done and pioneered new things, failed and bounced back and tried again. So if there is anything that we can do to give something for you to take away and do something different, maybe helpful, that's what my head says. My hellos tells me that most of us, I don't know, many of us at least, we are not going to leave this industry. We are going to spend our work life serving this industry. Why don't we do something better for this industry that we are going to spend the entire life? It's a serious thing. So with that vision, with that thinking in mind, I'm going to ask Pramita. The definition that Michelle provided about the critical minerals. What do you think the importance of non-critical minerals are? Are there other minerals that are not defined as critical, but we can't live without them?
Sure, and maybe I can take a step back and pick up where we left off last. Today, the world is dealing with 2 or 3 very critical topics. The first of them, is supply chain security, and supply chain security also in the form of making sure that you're bringing the supply chain closer to the point of use. We call it nearshoring, friendshoring, some kind of assuring, right? And the materials that we mine and are getting used somewhere in the supply chain, they're all worried about it. So that's number 1. Number 2 is ensuring that we help companies and countries accelerate and fulfill their decarbonization journey. And while we are doing it, there is a huge need for transparency. So that's number 3. Because if you don't prove to them, like we call it trust but verify. Doing it is one thing, and the second thing is going to be just to verify that you're able to tell your consumers and the end customer that what you're saying is rightfully done. So if you take these 3 aspects, and I look at the list of critical minerals, is that it? And the answer will be no. So we have what we call critical minerals from a DoD perspective, a list which is very scientific, talks about all the minerals that are required for the battery evolution. But then there is a critical materials list that comes from DOE exactly for this purpose, because there are materials, and I'll name one deep to my core, is copper. Copper might not be in the list of critical minerals, but even for the battery technology, you need copper. And hence it's a critical material that is absolutely essential to address the 3 points that every jurisdiction, every country is trying to address. So in our discussion, hopefully it will come out that there is a list which is scientific and there is a list for the industry. Many materials have interdependency, and if you look at the supply chain, many of them are not probably, especially sitting here where we are in the US, they cannot be addressed by the pure virgin mining technology. It could possibly be some kind of a other process where it is you're mining for one and addressing 2 materials in the process. So Ash, to your point on critical minerals / materials, non-critical minerals, I would add a lot of them that would be in there. I'll go one step ahead and say even aluminium should be one of them, because you do have a finite amount of aluminium on the world today, and a lot of that is tied in jurisdictions which, sitting here, we cannot really go out and access because of the countries they're originating from. So,
fantastic. Thanks. I'll follow up a little bit more on that.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned about the supply chain for all critical, non-critical minerals, but as we increase the production volume, where do you see a balance between supply and sustainability?
as in what would be prioritized. I don't know if, can you guys hear me? Sorry, okay, all right. So in terms of balancing, that was a little too low. High energy factor. You mean balancing between supply and sustainability?
Exactly.
Which one does one prioritize?
Yeah.
I don't think we have the luxury of prioritizing them anymore. You cannot do one versus the other, and I think Dean addressed it in a prior conversation where he said, you know, ESG is becoming more and more critical, but companies will have to have a realization of what can be done, and that realization is going to be the pivot point. Rio has, and many of you probably know, we have been talking to a lot of the end users, the OEMs, and been working with them. When we talk to them, we realize that their supply criterias and their criteria for selection for the material or the supplier is based on, yes, you have availability, we're expecting you to have availability, that's why we're talking to you, but tell us about your ESG credentials. And now tell us how you're going to show and prove to us those ESG credentials. So none of them are actually in a priority list, Ash, anymore. It's more like there is a license to operate, license to sell. It's a qualification factor and the winning factor. They all come to the table at the same time.
Of course. My next question is to you, Anthony.
Sure.
In terms of risks, are there some risks specific to critical minerals, or they are horizontal risks shared by all critical and non-critical minerals?
So I think at the end game that the biggest risk is there's not enough, right? So every mining company is out looking for copper, you know, every mining company is out looking for nickel and those other critical minerals. So the risk is, you know, where are they and can you access them responsibly? And it's starting to drive different mindsets. So for example, tailings dams were often seen as a liability. Now more and more they're seen as an asset that you can go back and reprocess those tailings and get the minerals you need out of those tailings, potentially with a lot less cost and a lot less environmental impact than opening a brand new mining site. So I think that the risk is how do you access those minerals and resources, how do you access them quickly, how do you access them safely with minimal impact as possible.
Understand. I'm going to follow up with one more question. So in terms of enabling technologies, your example of tailing dam.
Right.
Now, we have been living and breathing technology in mining, despite whatever the impression outside world is. Be it the telemachinery at tailings dam, be it your gaming platform for the tech resources, or be it your electrification of Golden Mine. We have been living and breathing this. But what do you think are the key overarching technologies that can help us go where we want to go, sustainably, reprocessing tailings, for example, or any other example to help us be more sustainable in the supply of critical and non-critical minerals?
So I think there's a lot there. So a couple. So at Vale, we're putting a lot of time and energy into black mass, right? How do we recycle batteries? How do we get a circular economy happening? Knowing that we're not going to be able to find enough kind of fresh minerals, so the recycling, the reprocessing, it becomes very important. And that's what our customers are wanting as well. If you talk to our customers, they want an ability to have that closed loop, to have that reusability baked into the relationship. But the other one is, look, we need to go after minerals in new and emerging places, and we need to understand, you know, how do we do that safely? How do we do that in a friendly way? Because as my colleague was alluding from Rio Tinto, is, you know, a lot of the minerals today are potentially not in very accessible or attractive areas, and we need to work out, you know, how do we deal with that in a responsible way.
I'll come back to that,
Sure.
and Pramit, I'll follow up on the circular economy. But before that, I want to ask Matthew Curtis. So Anthony mentioned about technologies, and all mining companies, different mining companies have different philosophy of implementation of technologies. How do you introduce a new idea? Should you introduce it from a HQ level and push it to the sites? Or should you provide more autonomy to the sites and let them pick what they think is the best? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can give my thoughts. Everyone can hear me okay? That was me. So to answer that question in regards to deployment of technologies, particularly at Newmont, I think Dean hit really well when he talked about things like, transparency and, even when he mentioned in regards to greenwashing in regards to ESG. A lot of our deployments, in my opinion, from experience, because it comes down from a top-down approach, right? So you basically, one of the things that we challenge a lot of our sites for and a lot of our peoples is what technology do you have now on your sites? And are you utilizing it and leveraging it to the best of its ability, right? Because as miners, we have a tendency to say, okay, we got this nice new shiny toy, let's throw money at it, this is going to solve my problems, right? So, but that being said is you have that, old Pinto in the backyard and you're in the back of your mind that could do the same job, but we just didn't leverage it. We didn't do the change management. We didn't do, the metrics to it. And it kind of talked about a little bit in regards to the Dean's point with the OSNs, with the data to leverage it and make it sustainable, right? So a lot of the deployments, you got to make sure you have a firm deployment plan, and for our opinion, anyways, you need to get away from that perpetual piloting methodology that a lot of us are used to, right? So there's no reason why you cannot look at a specific technology for a specific problem. What problem are you trying to solve at your mine site? That's the first question, and then you take a look and say, okay, well, let's leverage this technology at a specific site. Let's test it. Let's do the white paper on it. Let's put it through all its characteristics, and then we make that kind of the standard for your corporation or for your entity, right? So then when your other sites come up and say, hey, I have that problem, here's the solution, we've already proved it, this is what you're going to use, right? So it gives you different options. And that, segueing back to your previous point, is having, we're kind of lucky, with Newmont that we actually have that support from the top down. So basically when we go in to do these technology deployments in different levels, you have support from your C-suite, you have support for your regional VPs, you have support for your GMs. And then when you go in there, it's not one of those circular silo projects saying, hey, look, we're going to deploy this. And I call it silo, I actually call it seagull project management, where you go in there and you drop it down and then you run away and you hope that they're going to sustain it. We got to get away from that mentality, right? Because it has to be a whole holistic deployment, which includes all the departments, all the people, everyone that's involved. So if it's IT, if it's maintenance, if it's technical services, it's operations, everyone needs to be involved. Everyone needs to be transparent for that deployment.
You threw in a good keyword, perpetual piloting. I'm going to come back to that. But before that, Preston, I want to ask your thoughts on the philosophy of implementation of new technologies. Top down, bottom up. Should sites be autonomous? Should sites be thinking about what's best for them? They know the local suppliers, they know the local problems. Or should it be top down? Any example that you can share that would be helpful?
I think, Ash, the ideal is really a balance between the two, because there are some things that the sites are very good at focusing on, and particularly the very near-term things that need to happen to debottleneck their process, to lower costs, to improve profit margins. But then there's also areas of technology where you really do need a corporate function to help look further into the future, to see what's coming next, and to enable that to happen at the ground level when it's time.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just want to segue that, and that's a great point. One thing as operators that sometimes we forget, and just kind of segueing from your point, is our operations, from us being a corporate support entity, our operations are our stakeholders, right? So I think Dean mentioned about stakeholders, and the stakeholders isn't just external, it's internal as well. So what do your stakeholders need, right? We're there to support our mines, not the other way around. They pay my salary, right? So we got to make sure that we are there to support them. So
if trust is the new currency,
Mhm.
and we don't have trust internally, how can we expect it externally? And I think that a lot of the issues that we've had in the past with deploying these technologies is we've really treated the front line as more of a guinea pig rather than a customer. And I think that we're finally discovering that and taking that journey to making them the customer, really engaging them, and not just trying so many new things all at once, but being very measured, but being powerfully measured with what we do go forward with.
So Preston, I think you picked on two key things there, right? I think there's a natural tendency to try to do too much at once, right? There's so much possibility out there. Let's go start 100 initiatives this year to try to move things forward. And things get lost. And if you're a frontline maintainer or a frontline operator, you don't really want your job changing every day, right? Every day there's a new tool, there's a new process, I've got a new form to fill out. So we need to really think of them as our partner and our customer and see things from their world. And how do we batch things up? How do we kind of moderate what we're trying to do out there? So one, it makes sense, but two, they're actually able to adopt what we want them to adopt while still being safe and still being productive. And I think in a big mining company where there's lots of people trying to do lots of good things, you can really easily overwhelm your frontline leadership and your frontline colleagues by trying to do too much at once in an uncoordinated way.
But that's a challenge that I think everyone faces. We're really good at adding things, we're at taking things away. I see it, if you want it to be successful, you have to understand your customer and know that it's going to make their life easier or better in some way. Also, you add a new thing, it better be replacing two older things. So simplification is something that's very powerful in this very much transitioning space. We need to be very mindful about, we are actually, even though we're implementing more and more technology, we're trying to simplify more and more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Efficiency through simplicity.
Michelle, so this conversation, you raised a point, excuse me, Preston, you raised a point about treating the frontline as a customer. And I think it ties very well with the change management topic that I'm going to raise in a minute. But before that, Michelle, what's going to happen to the definition of critical minerals? You described them really well. But going forward, as we struggle with the sustainability, the reserves and everything, do you think some critical minerals are going to disappear, or we have to rename, we have to identify new critical minerals? What's going to happen?
I think that Parmita actually touched on this very well, and in terms of that list of critical metals is really going to grow over the course of the next while. I think there's opportunity for a number of these metals to be added to that, and again, it depends on who's looking at that list and what those metals are being used for. So, no, I think there's opportunity for it to grow significantly.
To me, the question of what is a critical mineral at the root of it, it's just a function of supply and demand. That's how we determine that. Let's do a little thought experiment where you take any mineral, cut its supply chain, and then ask yourself how long until that becomes a critical mineral.
Yeah. So I think we can't stay away from that philosophical discussion. Is how green do we want to become?
Yeah, these metals are going to evolve as we do as a society, and what our application of those metals are. Those critical metals and their deemed necessity is really going to evolve as well.
Exactly.
And innovation is going to drive a part of that. The things that we have scarcity of now, I count on there being innovations that change the materials used to provide the same end result.
Exactly.
It's going to happen. It's just we don't know when
Right.
or what it will be.
Right. Okay. Let's circle back on that point about the perpetual piloting, and then we will move to the change management and treating the front line. So perpetual piloting, Anthony, you and Preston, if you could, you have been on so many different pilots, and you just mentioned that we are very good at adding things. We are not good at taking things away and saying, oh, it's not working out, let's stop it. But how do you deal with that? If someone has come up, let's say a frontline person has come up with an idea that they think is valid, and you know from your heart it's not going to stick, how do you deal with perpetual piloting?
So I think that perpetual piloting does have its place in the world of innovation and research and development. I think what makes it successful is our ability to abandon the pilots as we realize, wait a minute, this is not where we actually should be going. Let's take our learnings and regroup many times what I see is people have so much invested into it, even that they know after a certain point, this is not sustainable, it's not going to be able to grow how we need it to, they will still continue to champion it when we need to embrace the failure and the learnings and move on. And if we're better at embracing those failures, I think that that's going to cause that cycle to work much better.
So one of the things that we're doing with my team is we're kind of avoiding the concept of a pilot and more framing it as an experiment or perhaps an A/B test. So if you think back to kind of the scientific method, you have a hypothesis and then you go out to either prove or disprove it, right? So the hypothesis might be this system is going to reduce exposure by this and increase productivity by that. So let's do some experimentations, let's validate the hypothesis. Does it or does it not, or could it with some enhancements? And so more and more now we're doing very deliberate A/B testing, we're doing very deliberate understanding not just the requirements, but what's the hypothesis, what does good look like, and it should become a really obvious, it meets or it doesn't meet, or it meets, but we need this enhancement. So that's number one. Number two is we're identifying proving grounds. We're identifying underground mines, iron ore mines, ports, facilities, and they're the place we go to do those experiments, right? So the workforce, the leadership know what's going on. They know that we're going to fail, right? We're going to do an experiment, we're going to see if this works, and everyone is totally comfortable if it doesn't work, right? Whereas in some other organizations, in some other processes, you kind of, you feel obliged to be successful, right?
Somehow.
But we're trying to make the mindset that if you're truly experimenting, then you can't always be successful because you're not going out on the edge enough if you're always being successful in your experiments.
And just to segue off of that, like we talk about the success, we talk about the different projects, which are all great points, and it kind of segues back to our stakeholders. Like all these projects aren't going to succeed if your miner in the face isn't going to use it, right? Or if your stakeholder, the person in the mill, is going to this is caca, right? So these are the things that we got to keep in mind when we do these deployments, right? And back to the point about perpetual piloting is we're trying to reduce costs, we're trying to be more efficient with our time. We try to only leverage something once, right? So I'm actually going to segue into one initiative, and I'm going to embarrass some people. That's right in front of me. So Tony, Mika, and Amberly actually are part of our innovation group. Hi. So anyway, one of the interesting things about their group that I really like, because we're talking about brand new technologies, not existing technologies, and bringing in like a teleremote system and deploying it. Those are existing and already there, right? But then you're looking at new and improved R&D and new stuff that's coming out that doesn't exist, right? So there's a process that these ladies go through that I think is quite awesome. Is they do the due diligence, like who's out there, do a market scan, what's actually happening. Is this actually feasible, right? So they do these questions before we even get to the point of, do we want to pilot this? And the due diligence in that type of program like that, I think for a lot of our organizations, could take a lot of, some pointers from that, right? And because it saves a lot of time and effort for us as miners to deploy projects that fail because we didn't do the due diligence, we didn't do the background checks, we didn't do the market scans and everything else like that, right?
But I think you, Preston and Anthony, you really talk very good point around the piloting is important. It is essential for innovation. We kind of experiment, and experiment by definition have a likelihood of failure, and we should accept that. And to your previous point around white paper, we do something, document it, and so that it's available for the other people to also learn from that experiment. So if they had something in mind, they can also go read that paper. Don't have to do that and repeat that mistake again.
But this one more segue to that is, again, going to our operations. First thing on that white paper is, what problem are you trying to solve with this technology or new process or whatever? And that's something that we have a tendency sometimes to forget. What are you trying to solve? Are you doing something because it's just cool? That's cool, but what's that going to do for our operation? What's that going to do for the people working in the field, right? So, that's one of the caveats that, we got to make sure we always have that answer to that question. What are we solving?
100%. And that's always is the case when we think of solving any problem, like behavioral problems. Perpetual piloting, and people always coming up with cool, shiny looking pebbles, and how do you make sure that you're not stifling innovation, but at the same time, you're not doing too much. And we always end up relying on processes and structures. So Paramita, my question to you is, nothing happens until someone changes their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is BS. Someone changes their behavior, and then you see success. So from a cultural perspective, how cultures, and we have heard the cliched line, culture eats strategy, etc. But realistically, how in our environment, in the mining world, how does culture affect implementation of technologies, adoption of technologies, and coming up with new ideas?
Ash, if I can take a deep leap out here, I don't think the two questions are mutually exclusive. Perpetual piloting to culture and how that morphs, and I'll give you an example. What we have found in Rio is bringing the voice of the market and bringing the customer as part of that journey has really accelerated in operations understanding that there is a timeliness for everything. I think, and I'll be eager to hear what the audience's view is, but I always tell my team, in a mining sector, we are right now running against time. This is a gift that we've been given by the decarbonization journey, and it's our responsibility and our accountability to deliver on this, because this decarbonization ESG journey is not achievable without our industry. But to make that link between the market, what's happening in the outside world, and how we bring it inside is critical. Because today, for instance, and if any of you are attending the next session, I'll dive into this later, but what I find is our objectives start with innovation and R&D. And some of our R&Ds, one of them that we very recently launched, takes 130 years. I don't know about you, but I don't have 130 years to waste to deliver on what I have to deliver to the customer. So when you bring that urgency down to the organization and show that this is why it's important, and to the employees and our frontline operators who are actually the lead, they are the lead in this journey. When you show to them that we are running against time, the customers are dependent on us, and while you're doing this, look at it 360 degrees per view, otherwise we will not be able to get this material to be possible for your next, and forgive me for using some brands, but your next F-150, for your next Apple, the watch or your iPhone, for the next MacBook Pro, for the next beer can that you're going to hold in your hand when you're actually socializing with your family. It suddenly becomes personal. And that has really helped shape our urgency in moving from perpetual piloting to now let's scale up for commercial and industrial scales. The second piece that has helped us is people are taking ownership, because it's no longer we're mining for bauxite, we're mining for iron ore, or we are trying to develop something for critical minerals. We're actually doing it for an end product in mind, which actually impacts me and my neighborhood. So that has transformed the culture. So I'll give you an example. In some of our operational / innovation / R&D conversations, now they actually start talking about, can we put it up on Start? And as way of introduction, because I haven't, the next session comes after this, Start is what we call our nutrition label of our products on a blockchain technology. We literally give that credentials over to our customers. And the criteria that we are selecting is, can we put this on Start such that a customer can understand it as much as we can? Can we accelerate? What timeline do we give? There are metrics over there where we might not be the best. Recycling, we're not there yet. But we put that criteria right on that label just to give a little bit of an awareness that we are not there, but we'll get there. And that is also a level of urgency that we have for all of us in our organization to drive this momentum. So perpetual piloting, transitioning from piloting to operational mode, then how do we actually transform this culture to understand what we as an organization are going through all in resonance? I think what has really helped us, and mind you, we're not saying we're perfect, but what has really helped us in bringing the journey of what's happening in the market down to the world in our minds. And that brings a little bit of ownership, a lot of accountability, and the urgency of time. And we as in mining sector, again, we are running against time. We're running against time, and I think I go back to the previous section that Dean mentioned. we are running against brand recognition in mining. And I think Dean said that, are we still mining in the US? I'll complement that. We get asked, mining is associated with hard hats and spades still in the US, right? It's a dirty industry in many mines. So the challenge that we face is, how do we change this perception? How do we change the perception of what we do? Because we are not in hard hats and spades, we are actually way technologically advanced. We are going into AI, machine learning, we are into AR, VRs. We are going into deep, deep drilling, like going to the center of the earth. We are going into places which the space agencies are taking our materials outwards. We don't do a very good job of promoting our sector. So promotion of that also empowers our employees in this cultural revolution, cultural transformation, because when they see that that material is significant to make the next solar panel, the next windmill, the next EV that people are talking about, suddenly it becomes, it's my product that's making it possible. And that word my, we cannot undervalue the importance of that. That will help our employees understand how we are all in this together to make this future possible. Sorry, emotional, but very passionate.
If I may add to that as well, and I think you're bang on in that sense. That transparency is so important to this culture, and taking the initiative to for end use customers to see what this material is going into, whether it's a MacBook or a F-150, whatever it may be. It's so important and paramount that mining is shown as being the pillar of this, and really the important factor to how these green industries are growing today. So I echo that completely. I think it's such a missed opportunity by the mining sector that enable us to really transform the industry and showcase what we're doing and why we're doing this, and why it's so important to everyone else out there.
Can I just I know I'm eating up more of the time, but just on that point, the word critical, and I know the topic of this session says critical minerals, so hopefully we'll tie it back to that. But the word critical, it's critical because it's for certain criteria, right? And yeah, we have the industrial criteria, but it's also critical because it's not available, but it's important, and hence the word critical. It bears upon us to show the world how it is critical. And when our employees go out and make that possible, that's a huge, huge empowerment that we can give to all of us. That we actually made that solar panel possible, all made in the US, or all made in USMCA, or all made in the North American region. That's immense. And I think that connectivity, that connective tissue amongst all of us, and then taking it all the way down to the people on the streets, which are actually us, by the way. We are the ones who are also driving and consuming these products. That connectivity is extremely important. Because today we talk about critical minerals, and I don't know if the rest of the world or the rest of the consumers are aware that many of the products that they're so used to using or consuming are not going to be possible if the mining sector doesn't do the magic that we are doing today. And that magic needs to be transformed into the world of our minds as well. Because we are so used to, our employees are so used to making these things happen. We take a haul truck, we make stuff happen. But to make them understand that you are responsible for the future, and the future will not be possible without you, I think that's the culture that we need to drive. Okay, now I'll keep quiet, having no
No, great points. Staying on that point a little bit more about change management, and I promise I'll come back to you, Matthew. When we think about, I have to manage change, or we are going change management, in my views, and you can say that's bullshit, that's not true. But when we think about managing change, I believe we have already lost. Because change has already happened without our guidance, without our supervision, and now we are just damage controlling things. How do you put that change as a part of your design? How do you lead the change and not manage the change?
Was that for me?
That's for you.
Okay, that was a good question. First, before I answer that, I just wanted to segue to the amazing, segueing to your point is like if A lot of people externally had the passion, like these people on the stage and everyone else here, the passion for our industry. Externally, then our lives would be a lot easier, because you see everyone here talking here on the stage and everyone out there. We're passionate about mining. We love mining. That's why we're in it, right? So I'm glad to hear you. I just wanted to say kudos. So now answering the question you asked. In regards to the change management, it kind of goes back into, because a lot of what's change management? You're basically trying to convince people to do something that they don't want to do usually, right? That's usually the definition that a lot of people give. But change management doesn't have to be that. Like a change management needs to incorporate a partnership, right? So for example, like if you're going to deploy, I'll give you an example. I won't get into the vendor or whatever, but I was in Argentina for over a month and a half doing a deployment for technology there. And that change management involved not trying to convince people to do something. It was a partnership. Not just with the site people, but with the vendor and the OEM, and saying, how do we bring everyone together? So like it's always like, okay, I bought this widget from you, and we're going to project manage it, and we're going to change manage it, and we're going to do stuff, and when it doesn't work, we're going to yell at you later, right? But we can't do that anymore. It actually has to be a true partnership moving ahead for a lot of these deployments. So if I'm going to do this widget, and I'm going to do this at my site, I need to bring all these people together. And how is this going to affect your job, your job, your job, your job, your job? What is that going to do? And then you have that discussion and that transparency to figure out and to let them know, this is what it's going to do. This is why it's going to benefit you. This is how it's going to affect you. And change management just becomes not that kind of, that evil kind of, change management, you're going to do this because we said so. It becomes, okay, this is now a process change, and becomes a way of how we're going to do things, and then people are going to say, okay, this makes sense. This is going to make my life easier. This is going to have us create more ounces out of the ground, or lower our own sustainable cost, right? And these are all those transparencies that we need to have with everyone within the organization, all the way down to that miner that you're training on. So you tell him or her, this is why we're doing it, this is why it's going to benefit you, instead of, you're going to do this because we're telling you to do it, right? And it's that entire mentality of the traditional change management from the PM block, which is good, right? When you follow the PMP block and kind of go through change management, but we need to evolve it to be to more the human factor, and kind of embrace a little bit more of the soft skills, right? Which sometimes have a lacking in a lot of deployments, right? Especially a lot of us are engineers, and you're just kind of you're very ones and zeros. You need to do this, and you have to have that humanity, right? And the deployments help. So, yeah, that's my blurb. That's my soapbox.
So I think what a number of companies may end up seeing is you can have the best new products and the best change management, but if you don't have a culture of change in your organization, you're doomed to failure, right? And with the way things are going in this day and age, if change isn't embedded in your culture, you're going to have problems. So going back to what Paramita said, we're on borrowed time, I think, for a number of different reasons. And here's kind of a thought on that. We'll find out what the critical minerals really are. We see the outside disruptive innovators coming in and competing with us in the mining space. So think about it like this. Tomorrow, let's say Elon Musk decides to get into mining, and maybe there's a couple of different minerals. Can you imagine the level of disruption that we're going to see? So if we don't innovate and disrupt and be very purposeful and aggressive about it, we're going to get over-innovated and disrupted from the outside.
I think we're already starting to see that happen, right? Maybe not the end users, but you're seeing some of these intermediaries come in and start to be aggressive with the mining companies and start to push for regionalizing supply chains, or building manufacturing or processing plants closer to the mine sites, so that they have a level of influence on these projects and the commodities that are coming out of the ground.
I think it's important that when we do things, we're not doing them in a random way, right? We have a narrative, we have a vision. People understand the vision, they understand why that vision is important. So they understand the whole jigsaw puzzle we're trying to build, and then when you come along with a piece, it's very clear this piece fits here, and this is why we're doing this piece now, right? So you're not coming in trying to do change management to convince someone to use a new historian, They understand the new historians because it feeds an AI process that feeds better quality, that means more sales, right? So there's a narrative, and it's very clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so, you know, I was at Rio Tinto at the time when we sold the aluminium into the F-150, right? And I was in an operation, we were super proud, like the first F-150 from aluminium, and it's our aluminium, it's not just anyone's aluminium, right? Likewise, I'm at Vale, and we announced that we're selling nickel to Tesla. There was a lot of vibe in the city that weekend, right? That we're one of the providers to Tesla, right? And people understand, you know, that narrative, and Tesla comes along and says, look, it's not just about your price. We want to know about your health and safety. We want to know about your environmental. We want to know about your diversity profile, right? So, and again, you know, we make sure the full workforce understands this. It's not just about being safe and productive. We have customers that have expectations, and here's how we're going to move to do that. Here's the overall picture, and then let's have a look at the parts that we start to use to fill in that picture.
Great points. And Preston, to your point around SpaceX or Tesla getting into mining and then what happens. I was in the SpaceX office 2 weeks ago in California, and we are signing a partnership with them to embed their satellite technology in all of our IoT devices. And they are so keen to get into mining. They're so keen to solve the problem of connectivity in mining industry. So we are signing a partnership for tens of thousands of units that we are going to deploy. So it's not far. It may happen anytime. All right, we are getting close to the time, and I've got very interesting questions from the audience. Thank you very much. You have been phenomenal. Very patient and very curious. So I'm going to start with a question from, my questions disappeared, but I memorized one. From Dean Niemont. Great fireside chat, by the way, Dean. But the question was that the organizations have finite resources. And the question was directed to Anthony and Preston. He did not choose you. So the question to you guys is, the organization has finite resources. How do you prioritize ideas? How do you prioritize where do you want to invest your time? Dean, correct me if I'm wrong. My dashboard has disappeared. I'm just playing with memory.
Okay, so I'll start. So we have an overall vision, lots of things we can do, but we prioritize back to that vision, number one. But number two is we don't kind of have central control and command of innovation, right? We're not saying, hey, you 5 people, you're the innovative people, everyone else just go about what you're doing. So we encourage continuous improvement. We encourage, you know, sharing of knowledge. So there's kind of ground level innovation, and there's kind of transformational innovation. And the transformational innovation is very much linked to enabling the strategy.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a way of thinking where you've got to enable and encourage the people to improve the things that are within their scope of control. And down at the site level, that's what they tend to focus on. Corporate level, they tend to focus on that as well. So you need full coverage of the gamut between the the short range and the long range, and you have to have a plan to start incorporating those together as you go, right? And part of corporate's job is to look further and look at the bigger challenges, the challenges we're going to see with incoming workforce and size of that workforce and skill, and really have to take on upskilling them to perform at levels of excellence, right? So it's really a balance, but I think that we need to empower people to innovate in the areas that they're able to.
Just add one more bit to it is, look, you don't have to do it alone, right? So with our friends at Newmont, we're talking about battery electric vehicles. With our friends at Glencore, we're also openly sharing what we're doing, right? So we don't all need to go and investigate fast charging or battery swap. We can come to consortiums where we work together, ourselves and the OEMs, to solve those big problems, right? So it doesn't have to be just by yourself. And the second stage is more and more Vale is going out to to startups, to academia, to the OEMs, and saying we want to co-invest. We need this capability, it doesn't exist. We want to co-invest and become a co-owner of whatever this particular solution is. And that's a way to handle the finances, but it's also a way to bring a lot more talent and innovation into the system as well.
You read my mind.
Okay, cool.
The next question is about that. So Olga from Glencore, you mentioned Glencore as well. So the question is, as you do your R&D programs, how do you manage the IP ownership of initiatives? Did I put you on the spot?
Me?
But
Okay.
anyone.
Okay, well, I'll start and feel free to jump in. So it depends. So we're doing a lot with entrepreneurs and startups, and quite often we're very open to they own the IP. We're there to help make them successful. We're there to be their first customer. But with some of the larger OEMs and academia, there's all sorts of joint ventures being set up. There's all sorts of IP licensing. So if we give a significant investment to help build a new product, then we not only want to use that product, but we do want to be recognised for that investment. We're not a bank, we're not a charity, but we want to be a way to stoke that innovation and again be that first customer.
I think we talked about how things are evolving within the sector, and one of the things that I've seen over the course of the last, let's call it 5, maybe 7 years, is this level of open sourcing and sharing and collaboration and working with groups that were adversaries in the past or at least competitors, and now being able to share these technologies or share solutions with an end goal of really being able to build better and build quicker for the likes of for the groups. I think there's an opportunity to continue to do that and to be able to use that transparency to build a much stronger, especially domestic economy within the sector, a lot more quickly than what we could have done if we tried to do this separately.
Ash, I'd like to jump in and just kind of go back to the question. What I heard from the question was, how do you make sure that your projects are set up for success through their leadership, whether they be frontline improvement or corporate level, and really it's aligning the success factors is what I've seen works the best. You want both your project owner and your champion to be the same person, if at all possible, and put it in the hands of a person who's passionate about making it happen. That yields very high success levels, in my experience.
But I can just, sorry, I don't know if you all, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry. If I can add one more thing, the last piece, yes, this is where, when it comes to IP, all of our companies, lawyers, get on a table, right? That's where they have the prime time, which is great. But I think what we are also finding is we need to let our guards down from where we used to be a long time back. And I know we spent an hour talking about critical minerals without mentioning one critical mineral on this. So allow me to at least close on that. EV revolution requires lithium. There is not enough lithium in North America to take care of the demand of the EV sector, nor in Europe. For that, if we have to do it different ways, we have to find a different way of also doing business. That would involve small companies and big companies coming together and partnering, mining companies and OEMs coming together and partnering. We are going to look at different technologies and different technological evolutions coming around and partnering. And in this case, I can imagine a lawyer's field day, but we have to look at it in terms of just making this possible. At the end of the day, us sitting in silos and not or worrying about IP is not going to let this future be possible. So lithium requires partnership. Scandium, which is required for all things that you know, aerospace, automotive to some extent, requires partnership. Tellurium for your solar panels requires partnership. I can go on and on with all the fantastic list of critical minerals, but critical minerals requires partnership.
And I know we're out of time. One thought. Imagine how much faster we could move and improve and innovate as an industry if we had a lot more collaboration between the companies who typically are much more competitor.
In the right way, for the lawyers in the room, in the right way.
Well done, guys. We had fun. So one checkbox is done. You guys are taking away something. So the second checkbox, and maybe we contributed to something to the mining industry. The third checkbox. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you like that?
Yeah, no,